Showtime!
Ladies and gentlemen, please make your way to your seats.
Showtime!
Please make your way to your seats. The show is about to begin.
Showtime!
Let the magic begin.
Welcome back to FutureTech, your weekly source for the latest in tech innovation and business. I'm the startup coach, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jon Irwin. How you doing today, Jon?
Great. Woke up to a little bit of snow this morning, so excited for the ski season to start.
Yeah, we have a slight dusting, and I'm going to have to stop riding my e-bike soon, so and either get back to my regular bike or whatnot, so we'll see. Well, let's just jump right into it. We've got some interesting stuff here. Today seems to be all about quantum computing, quantum mania. Is it Ant-Man and the Wasp in
Quantum Mania? Yeah, are we going to get sued by Marvel or
just for saying that? I don't know. Yeah, not a great movie, but hopefully this will make a great podcast. We got some very technical stuff here. So the first one here is from Cornell University. Transport of bound quasi-particle states in a two-dimensional boundary superfluid.
I know, crazy, right? So we're talking about quantum physics here. So we're talking about essentially superfluids and different things like that. So when superfluid helium-3 is cooled to very, very low temperatures, it forms a special type of, again, superfluid with strange properties, quantum properties. At the edges of its container, some of the excitations in the fluid get trapped in a super thin layer. Like we're talking nanometers deep. In previous studies, they've hinted that this trap layer acts almost independently from the rest of the main fluid, superfluid. But up until this point, we didn't really have strong proof. What this article talks about is these researchers directly poked and prodded the trap layer to see how it would react. And what they discovered was the particles inside could flow around like a completely separate superfluid on their own. Also, when energy was added or removed, the container's superfluid stayed the same. So we're talking outside of that edge, proving that the trap layer was independent. And it does relate to quantum mania because it's really cool. So this means that by shaping containers creatively, we could essentially design multi-part, let's call them superfluid circuits, just using the edge layers. The researchers can now directly control and measure these edge states, which is really cool. So understanding interfaces like this trap layer will help to explain more complex materials. It also opens up using the edge fluid for applications like you said, Craig, quantum computers. So by exploring superfluid edges further, scientists are learning how to engineer new low-dimensional quantum materials, essentially, if that makes sense. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I want to take a step back at a basic level and say, okay, we all understand fluids. We drink water, but what is the definition of a superfluid?
A superfluid essentially is a state of matter that behaves in unusual ways when cooled to extremely low temperatures. Some of the key properties of superfluids include zero viscosity. So they flow without resistance, meaning they can continue to move even when an applied force is removed. They have, this is kind of cool, they have the ability to climb walls. So in certain conditions, a superfluid can climb the walls of its container instead of pooling at the bottom like a normal liquid. And there's something what's called quantum phenomena. Superfluids exhibit strange quantum properties due to interactions between their constituent particles. There's specific temperatures required. So only certain elements like helium isotopes become superfluids when cooled below a critical temperature. And usually that's a fraction of a degree above absolute zero. So in essence, a superfluid is like a quantum state of matter that behaves like an ideal liquid with no internal friction, effortlessly flow and perform seemingly impossible fluid dynamic tasks. So we're talking quantum physics here, which is completely different than regular physics, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think we understand that quantum physics is magic and real physics is real. So we understand that there's a separation here. And, I'm always a skeptic, and it's really interesting to read this and, always go back and read Schrodinger's cat for if you want to understand just the basics of the concept here about how things can be both exist and non-exist at the same time in a subatomic state. So, okay, so that's a superfluid. And right now, quantum computers are mostly in these huge near absolute zero rooms. So when we say it needs to be cooled, it would obviously fit right in a quantum computer room that's been super cooled to near zero.
Yeah, it should. And just for those out there who don't know what absolute zero is, it's the lowest theoretical temperature on the thermodynamic temperature scale, which is equal to 0 kelvins, it's another way of measuring temperature, and we won't get into that. But if we want to put it into our Canadian people, Celsius, it's negative, I think 274 or 273 degrees Celsius. And it's the point at which the atoms and molecules in a substance have minimal vibration, motion, and experience negligible thermal energy. So when you have anything that's any kind of matter, you have vibrational motion of the atoms, and at that temperature, there's very minimal.
Yeah, absolute zero is negative 273 Celsius or negative 459 degrees Fahrenheit, just for those if you wanted to compare those things. Great. It works in a quantum computing situation.
Yeah.
What actually causes the trapping of the quasi particles at the superfluid boundaries?
It's a phenomenon called the Andreev reflection, which is a Russian physicist, I believe, and he first observed this in the 1960s. So when quasi particles collide with the boundary between the superfluid and the container wall, they can't penetrate the wall due to the superfluid's quantum property. So instead, they bounce back into the fluid in kind of what's called a reflective state. If they have low enough energy, this traps them within a nanoscale quantum wall near the surface. If that makes sense. Honestly, reading about, and like you said, Craig, reading about quantum mechanics, quantum physics, quantum computing, it's a whole new, you're opening a whole new ball game of potential applications. You're opening up, it's like a whole new language.
Yeah, so I read this article, and then my first question is okay, so we can create and control these 2D condensates.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this?
There's a few key reasons for this. It opens a pathway to transform essentially scientific discovery, to develop whole new technologies, but quantum technologies. First off, science discovery. So 2D condensates exhibit unique quantum behaviors and phase transitions that don't occur in a bulk three-dimensional system. And studying them furthers our fundamental understanding of exotic, and we call it exotic now because it's all new to us, quantum states of matter. It helps us to engineer new materials. So being able to design the topology and properties of quantum materials by precisely engineering confinement allows us to experimentally realize phases not found in nature, and this will help to accelerate those discoveries. It'll help us with scalable quantum technology. So complex patterns of interconnected 2D condensates may enable schemes of robust quantum information processing that surpasses scalability limitations of current approaches like isolated atoms and defects and things like that, and new applications. Advanced control and sensing via manipulation of quantum fields. It's going to make everything more accurate, larger, scalable. There's infinite possibilities. And it's a good way to describe quantum because there's infinite possibilities. There's infinite ways to read a particle, right? So by pushing the frontiers of precise nanoscale engineering and our ability to manipulate quantum phenomena, like 2D condensates offer opportunities to drive discovery, develop new technologies, and different things like that.
It all sounds interesting, but it's all very theoretical in my mind. Like they're doing it. We're seeing these cool things happen at a very scientific edge, but we're pretty early really to understand what's really happening. I think like what uses and how going forward this is all going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. This is like we're in extremely infant stages, and I guess the difference between the research being done now versus the research being done in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s is we have the internet. We have a lot easier access to information, which means we're getting access to the research and things being done much easier and earlier on than we would have back in the 40s, 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
It's interesting because we've been talking about quantum and a bunch of different, and we see these quantum mania, and that's great. And I hope Marvel sues us because that's probably the most attention we'll ever get. So let's make that happen. Let's jump on to the next article here.
Sure.
Room temperature addressing of single rare earth atoms in optical fiber. This is from the American Physics Society. Okay, so What the heck?
It follows along the same kind of lines of research of the first article, but this is more for let's call it a quantum internet. Scientists have been trying to use rare earth elements embedded in glass fiber. So if you think fiber optic is essentially just a piece of glass fiber stretched out. And so they're trying to use rare earth elements embedded in glass fiber for applications like the quantum internet. So they emit colorful photons, even at room temperatures, which is really cool, making them appealing quantum bits. So there's been previous studies done that have hinted that rare earth ions form a strange, again, 2D superfluid just at the edge of the fiber, but they couldn't prove it again. So these researchers directly simulated ions at the edges and watched them flow, confirming that it's an independent superfluid. What they also showed was that energy transfer between light and matter only occurred at the edges and not inside the main fiber, which proves that the edge superfluid is truly isolated. And so being able to control edge states opens a whole new way of engineering weird quantum materials just by shaping the fibers themselves. So fibers also keep rare earth elements stable at any room temperature. In short, it's going to be useful for scalable networks. It also deepens the understanding of strange thin films that could show up at material interfaces. But if we just summarize a little bit, the findings unlock a new potential to design structured quantum circuits and materials at the smallest scales by manipulating exotic edge fluids. And it brings kind of longer lasting ambient quantum technologies closer to reality. So if you look at these two combined, so we've got quantum computing and we've got quantum internet, which are both similar in kind of how they're going to how the technology is being developed and the research behind the technology itself.
I read this article and there's a lot of interesting terms in here. One I glommed onto was the quantum internet. So What the heck is the quantum internet? I've heard of the dark web, but I want to be on the quantum internet. Where do I get that?
Quantum internet, it's a proposed future form of internet that utilizes quantum communication and entanglement between quantum computers and other quantum devices. So it is a whole new realm of internet, which we probably won't realize for the next, I don't know, I would say maybe 20, 30, 40 years. But if we just drill it down a little bit, so quantum communication network. So this would use photons, atoms, or other quantum systems to transmit quantum information between nodes in a quantum network. And I keep repeating the word quantum because it's not going to transfer information between a regular network. No, it's going to transfer information in a quantum framework, if that makes sense. So what this could do, though, this is really cool because this could allow for really, really, really secure, almost unbreakable, at least at this point, communication. So like the other things, some other aspects are quantum algorithms. So distributed quantum computing tasks and new algorithms could be run across a global quantum network to tackle problems beyond the abilities of classical networks and computers. And again, it all comes back to quantum computing as well. Quantum repeaters. The devices could help distribute and maintain entanglement over long distances by overcoming photon loss in transmission. They are essential to make kind of entanglement feasible over global scales. And again, there's interfaces, there's distribution, there's a whole bunch of different things, but there's challenges, obviously. So the implementation it faces a lot of hurdles. Other than we need the technology to be developed, but there's hurdles around distribution and maintenance of these quantum states over fiber, over free space, or satellite. So by the transmission, it's like when you transmit power over your lines, right? You're losing power the longer the distance goes, and this is one of the problems here. Again, we're still in its infancy. So a mature quantum internet could far surpass the capabilities of today's classic internet, but we're far away from that.
Oh, I have some questions based on what you said, and I apologize if we go off here. But okay, so I always thought quantum entanglement, there was no loss of integrity across the universe, but it's impossible for us to measure that, but across our ability to measure, meaning that you have a quantum device. Let's just say I'm living in a sci-fi world, quantum Kindle that we can input text on, and that's quantum entangled with mine, so I can type stuff on mine and it instantly at the same time appears on yours because the things are quantumly entangled across the universe. So when we talk about quantum internet, are we talking about connecting computers this way? Are we talking about physically? Because you're talking about repeaters, we're talking about a lot of other things. So I understand that quantum entanglement, getting all these quantum computers quantum entangled probably is Skynet and it's going to kill us all. So let's be careful about that. But sounds like the way to go. But it sounds like it gets more complex the more you entangle things.
And this is weird to me too. This is kind of new to me, but I think because of the introduction of another medium of transportation, that's where we talk about, like we're talking about, like you said, there's going to be probably technologies that are being built that are going to hinder the distribution or the communication of quantum communication, if that makes sense. I don't like you said, quantum entanglement should essentially be lossless. But again, this is all new, and I'm not sure where they're going with this or what this research means as far as loss of information or degradation of information, because essentially that's the problem we face right now with the internet without using fiber, because fiber is essentially lossless using light. But it's a good question. We'd have to dive into that a little bit more. Absolutely.
We've talked about quasi particles in the article before this and in this one. How does it relate to this? What exactly is a quasi particle, and how does it relate to this research?
Essentially, the quasi-particles are emergent behaviors that can encode and transmit quantum information, just as photons are used today. Manipulating those quasi-particles could enable quantum communication networks. So entangling quasi-particles in different locations could distribute quantum states for uses like unconditionally secure message transmission or teleportation over quantum internet links. But don't get me started on teleportation. Certain quasi-particles like anions have properties enabling fault-tolerant topological quantum computing. Quasi-particles, again, in topological phases, may serve as a robust quantum memory node, and you can combine these with on-demand single quasi-particles as a pathway to architect a scalable quantum internet. Again, quasi-particles are still speculative and long-term. We need to understand how quasi-particles are going to be used. They're going to be instrumental in this, but how to eventually build out a practical technology using quasi-particles, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I've got a curveball probably for you here. You talked about superfluids in this article and the previous article. And in the previous article, we talked about how superfluids are cooled to almost absolute zero. But in this article, we're talking about room temperature addressing single Earth elementals. So how is superfluids in this related to the first article? And do they have to be cooled to a certain level to be able to do this research?
So we are not at this. There was an article that I posted actually on LinkedIn that said that they did find a rare earth element that can work at room temperature or above That doesn't have to be super cooled. But after it was peer reviewed, it was found that it was kind of there's a lot of holes that still need to be addressed. When it comes to superfluids and rare earth elements and things like that, in order for any of this to be viable, in order for any of this to be scalable, in order for us to develop a quantum laptop, we need to be able to get. So right now, all this research is being done at a very, 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 very low temperature. But in order for anything to scale up, in order for this technology to move forward, we need to raise that temperature. And we're not at that state yet, if that answers your question.
Rare earth elementals, in case anybody, rare earth elements. I'm not playing D&D here and pulling earth elemental out of the ground to attack my opponents. Rare earth elements are a group of 17 chemical elements in the periodic table, and they're not necessarily rare, but they're usually hard to extract and get production. So they're around and can be used. It's just sometimes it's hard to get at. So they're not necessarily rare as in they don't exist other places.
No, yeah, they're just difficult. Well, yeah, some of them are rare, but yeah, they have unique magnetic and luminescent properties due to their kind of electron configuration, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they're used in, phosphors and color television tubes and stuff, and like you said, magnets and other various applications. So it's interesting to see where we're going to go with this, and our extraction technologies is going to have to improve. Are we going to be like, hey, between these elements and stuff like helium-3, are we now going to be trying to grab stuff from the moon and stuff from asteroids going by so that we can continue to use these things?
Yeah, well, speaking of which, helium-3, which is the superfluid that we were talking about in both, actually, that I think there's an abundance of it on the moon. And Greg, you might be able to speak better to that if we're talking about helium-3.
Yeah, I had an interesting discussion with this a couple of years ago with the founder of, I think it's Ohana now. And he was talking about touting the new helium-3 deuterium fusion reactors and how it's a race on to pull helium-3 from the moon to use it for this kind of thing. So I was concerned that, are we going to be able to use helium-3 for this kind of technology and research and development when it's such a rare thing that we have to be searching for? And, I don't think the helium-3 deuterium fusion reactors are going to go anywhere, because we talked about a few things in the last episode about some different technologies, but I've been looking at some of the stuff that Bill Gates have been proposing for the last few years, where their latest technology just eats its own. So there's no waste. Yeah. So, and we don't need helium-3. We don't need these other things. So we skip mine. That doesn't mean we can't use helium-3 for these other things. So yeah, when people look at this, they wonder, how is this related to the stuff they put in the balloons, right? What is that helium-4? Is that what you're telling me?
It's helium-4. Yeah. So, but helium-4 we're also running out of helium-4 as well. So I believe is what they're saying. But again, they keep saying we're running out of oil. So who knows?
We reached peak oil in the 70s, didn't we? Peak oil, we reached that in the 70s, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, our oil sands are like, there's nothing in the oil sands, right, in Canada here, but yeah. No, it's so yeah, there's different isotopes of helium. So helium-3 is what's being is what can be used as a superfluid because it can exist as a liquid at low temperatures, very low temperatures. I don't know the properties of helium-4. All I know is that it makes your voice sound high, and it can be used in a bunch of different applications. But we're talking about a real world application that people can understand is helium balloons. So,
we talked about secure multi-party communication or computation, where, with these kinds of things, you can jointly compute a function over their inputs while keeping the inputs private because of the way quantum cryptography works. You talk about quantum teleportation, but that's for information. So I don't know if that's just quantum entanglement, where my whatever is the same as your whatever across the world. If it's just information teleportation, I don't really think that's teleportation.
No, based on research and everything and my understanding of physics and quantum physics and everything like that, what they're saying is in order for you to teleport matter from one area to the next, you actually need to disassemble all the atoms, all the atoms of the person or the matter, and reassemble it. So you're actually making a copy of yourself at the location, unless they come up with a new, maybe with this quantum research they'll come up with something. But as of right now, there's no real way to teleport yourself as it is right now, or any kind of matter as it states right now. It would have to be a copy of yourself or a copy of the matter.
Yeah, the whole concept is interesting, and I can't wait till the Star Trek teleporter, I guess, if I'll trust it when it comes out. But the concept is interesting, especially, at that point, I think we get interesting technologies. If we have to break down the human body at a cellular level, and we can transport it physically over here, we can take out what I'm going to call impurities. Is that cancer? Is that blindness? Is that COVID? I don't know. But what we want to be able to cure half the stuff that, we take shots for out for a couple of months just by teleporting somewhere. So I think we could.
And that gets into a whole new line of ethics there and a whole bunch of things but it's cool. It's true though.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. You want to talk about it? I want to teleport in from my fat body into a huge muscular body. Let's make that happen.
Yeah.
I want, we can.
Well, I think where the technology that's more close to reality to helping with that and eliminating ailments and diseases and things like that is the CRISPR gene editing tool. I think, and we can get into that in another case. We're getting off a little bit off, but the CRISPR is a way to specifically edit genes or DNA in your body, and you can insert things, which is kind of cool. So it's like a copy and paste into the genes. So it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, people should read up on that. It is really cool technology.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, it is scary, but it's custom. CRISPR is very custom to you. You've got to go in for like a 2-week thing. They do all this DNA. They do this. They do that.
Yeah.
And they put you on this customized program. It's pretty intense. It's not like you get a pill and walk out.
No, and it's the reason why one of the reasons I was just talking about this with one of the Knowledge Society kids. There's these high school kids, super, super smart, ridiculous, very driven. They're actually working. Some of them are doing research with the CRISPR right now, which is scary. These high school kids, which is awesome. So, yeah.
Shout out to Navid and the TKAs, folks. Haven't talked to you guys in a while. Love to chat and see what we can be doing together. It's been a few years, but yeah, I remember when they were starting that. It's an amazing program.
Yeah, maybe we can get some of them on here talking because they love to talk. They love technology too.
Yeah, I think we just have to figure that out. I think there should be like a monthly or whatever format where I used to do anyway, we'll get off topic. I don't want to take our time away from this. We'll move on to the next article because the question actually is more related to the next one. So this comes from Cosmos, not Cosmo, Cosmos magazine.
Yeah.
Where are we with quantum computing?
Yeah. So you've heard about it, I'm sure, or maybe not. So the article itself provides a useful historical context for quantum computing by comparing the earliest general purpose computer, the ENIAC, from the late 1940s to modern quantum machines. So while ENIAC filled an entire room, quantum computers today still resemble their bulkiness, requiring painstaking wiring and cooling to ultra cold temperatures. You actually, I was at CES one year, and I think it was IBM. They had their quantum computer there, but it was all these pipes and wires, and it looked like a beehive hanging. It was really, really cool. So despite the hype, quantum computer remains at a very early experimental stage, and they're calling it the noisy intermediate scale quantum. Real world applications are still distant until error rates drop substantially. So we do understand that the core computational units, and we call them qubits, which can represent ones, zeros, or superpositions, unlike classical bits, which is 0 or 1. However, maintaining the coherence of multiple entangled qubits is enormously challenging. And I think they're making slow progress. I don't want to state where they are right now, but yeah. So there's leaders like IBM and Google who have built machines. Even I think Honeywell have built a quantum computer. So they built, so let's talk about IBM and Google though. They built machines with dozens of qubits, but the problem is the error rates remain too high. So there's millions of perfect qubits, but millions of perfect qubits without errors are needed to outperform classical supercomputers. And right now there's a lot of different approaches that are being tested, like supercomputers, silicon, diamonds. But the problem is we don't know what technology will scale. So there's a lot more inventions are needed for quantum computing. And if we relate that back to classical computers, the transistor was invented not specifically for classical computing, but it was invented, and that's what helped classical computing to scale. Overall, if we summarize this, there's been significant progress that's been made, but quantum computing still remains similar to early mechanical computer designs, where it needs further engineering advances to move from theoretical potential to practical reality.
Yeah, the quote from the article that I liked was, the machines still have enough errors that it's almost impossible to tell if the machines worked or if these $1 million systems are just producing random noise.
Yeah.
And then they go on to say, even that is impressive. I'm like, what? You don't even know if it's just like, hey, it got the answer right. It's out of 100 times. Well, is that, good or bad? So getting back to how this relates to error correction, what kind of techniques is it? Does it look like there actually is ways to error correct at this level so we can reduce this noise?
Yeah, so error correction is really important. Qubits they're very delicate and they're prone to errors from noise or measurement. So when you think of a qubit, it's in a state. But when you measure that state, you change the state, essentially. So they need to be able to measure it without changing the state. Yeah, so even looking at it disturbs it. So without error correction, even a few extra errors could render results absolutely meaningless. And so what researchers are doing is they're developing codes that encode one logical qubit into many physical qubits, allowing detection and correction of errors. So there's other things. Topological approaches arrange qubits into geometric patterns that can also protect information. And also machine learning, not AI, is being applied to correct errors. So we still need significant breakthroughs, but error correction will likely be crucial to scale quantum computers to their full potential.
How would you compare error correction at this quantum computing level to like error correcting memory we have on computers and such now? It's obviously completely different. I think the error correcting on computers now prevents the computers from like shutting down when they get an error versus producing an erroneous result.
Yeah, so the problem is, so with error correction in classical computers, classical bits can be perfectly duplicated, allowing simple redundancy-based error detection correction through majority voting. Qubits cannot be cloned due to the no cloning theorem. Classical errors are either 0 or 1 bits flipping. So you can detect that by parity checks. With quantum errors can cause arbitrary, unknown, multi-qubit gate operations requiring essentially active correction algorithms or active correction. I don't want to use the word syndromes, but like active correction, active error correction. Quantum error correction encodes one logical qubit into many physical qubits in an entangled code word, introducing redundancy via encoding entanglement rather than duplication. Quantum error correction faces a unique, again, quantum challenge versus kind of a simpler redundancy model of classical computing.
Yeah, I feel once you start wrapping all this stuff together, I'm sure they have a handle on it, but this just seems like the classical waiting to collapse on itself, because I can't trust a single qubit to do what I want it to do. I got all these other qubits, but what happens if any one of those isn't doing what it's doing? We got monitoring that, like all it takes is a cascading. It's like, I used to be CTO and we'd be monitoring the server rooms and stuff, and everything was great until, the monitoring software went down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've got an exponential problem because of the quantum state that qubits can be in, right? Whereas with classical computing, although it was a problem when they were first developing computers, I feel personally that it's a much smaller problem for classical computing than it is now, because you're only dealing with two states of a bit, 0 or 1, whereas quantum bits have infinite states.
Is obviously a challenge and going to be interesting, and when we say infinite states, it's infinite state. So what does state A397005760543 AC mean versus the next state, right, which is one increment above that? And I don't know, like, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. So back to the question that everybody wants to know is, when am I going to get my laptop quantum computer?
Yeah, so it's difficult to predict when we're going to get laptop scale. So if we can break it up into years, so within 5 to 10 years, we're going to have some basic quantum computing application. This is just me again, that may be possible using cloud-based quantum devices that are larger than laptops but portable in size. So, but the problem is error rates are still going to be high, and it's going to limit the tasks. Within the next 10 to 15 years, we should have improvement in qubit coherence, times and number. Quantum volume could surpass classical systems for certain optimization problems, but again, a full programmable laptop scale device at this point still likely out of reach. 15 to 20, again, now we're getting into the error correction. So if we can actually get the error correction codes and stability issues are overcome, we can get maybe desktop or server size universal quantum computers. 20 to 30 years, potentially get to that point. It may just reach millions of qubits by non-experts for some applications, but we're beyond 30 years for large-scale error-corrected quantum circuits surpassing classical computers for all tasks. Is that's where we're going to be. So it's going to enable full-fledged quantum laptop ubiquitously. It's going to there's going to be many more fundamental advancements, but I think we're about 30 years out at least before we get to a quantum laptop.
So I assume I shouldn't be holding my breath, and I should consider upgrading my laptop before then?
Absolutely. Yeah, you should. Yeah, absolutely. But like, this is, so the thing is this could all be thrown out the window if there's a major breakthrough that happens. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what that could be. But if there's a major breakthrough, it could accelerate things, or setbacks could slow progress down, one or the other.
This will be an interesting field to continue to follow, and we'll stay on top of it, just because, quantum is magic, and once we have this, the world is going to change in ways that we don't even begin to understand right now, if this becomes a reality.
Yeah.
Or when 30 years from now, like you said, we'll have the laptops. So do we really want everyone in the world running around with quantum laptops? What does that mean to, it's mind-boggling when you start thinking about what people will be able to do with these kinds of technologies.
Well, it's mind-boggling what people can do right now with a laptop and Kali Linux and just a little bit of knowledge, right? Like, it's scary what they can do. So imagine with the infinite possibilities, and with quantum computing, the security issues come into play and different things like that. So it's gonna be an interesting time in the next 30 years for technology, for people, for everything.
Yeah, I use Mint. From a Linux build point of view, it's straightforward. It has everything you need, and you can jump right in.
Yeah. Well, Kali is for net penetration. And,
yeah, I know.
Yeah. So for those,
I ran a few versions of it, and what was it before that with the dragon? I can't remember. It used to be called something else. Doesn't matter.
Before that. But yeah, no, it's it for those of you who are interested, it's really, really straightforward. It's not like back in the day Linux, Unix, where it was just a command line interface. It looks like a Windows laptop, kind of more rudimentary, Windows like 98. But was there a Windows 98? Anyways,
yes,
it looks more rudimentary, but it's really cool for those geeks out there.
Yeah, and let's tell a little bit of history here. People don't know this, but since we're both ex-Deloitters, did you know that I installed the first machines with what was called Satan back in the day, which is now, Kali, which was a set of hacking tools for Deloitte, so they could do penetration testing for customers. And they would charge thousands and thousands of dollars to run the scripts I programmed on the laptop to run it.
That's crazy. And you know what? That's pretty much all network penetration testing is you're running a bunch of scripts. It's still nowadays like you're running a bunch of different programs like Nmap and different things like that that you're doing to test for open ports for different things like that. So not much has changed except for maybe the interfaces and kind of maybe the speed and technology. I don't know. Maybe you can talk to that, Craig.
The whole thing has changed significantly. The tools have changed. There's so much stuff. If you want to have a little fun, heck, go over to Hack 5. They've always got some great tools and videos on the latest stuff where you just sell you the USB drive with all the tools. You've got the tools where the rubber ducky where you just stick it in and you own the machine once they stick it in and stuff. There's some pretty cool things that you can do. And yeah, your machine is not safe. Your machine is
never. One thing, if anyone takes away from this, other than the quantum information, is never connect to a public Wi-Fi. Never, even if you have a VPN, because those few seconds that you're between connecting to the Wi-Fi and connecting to your VPN, you could be vulnerable. But again, if you do have to connect, use the VPN always.
I break that rule all the time, but definitely get the secure tools for yourself, making sure I use Little Snitch on my Mac. I don't know if you have that's a nice firewall tool.
Cool. I'll have to use that. I don't use that.
It, like all these tools, they're a pain in the butt to set up, but once you set up, they're great because you're allowing every time a new app or type of traffic comes through, you gotta deny or accept it and all that kind of stuff. But once it's set up, you look at all this stuff happening and you're like, okay, this is interesting.
Yeah, no, it's crazy though. What I've done is I've increased my data on my phone now, and now I use that to tether when I'm out in public instead of connecting to public Wi-Fi. So yeah, we can talk a whole thing about cybersecurity, and maybe that can be our next.
Yeah, let's talk about that next time. What do you got to promote this week?
I gotta think of something to promote for next time, but no, just check out all the events that we have going on. I think you have some upcoming mentoring magic and
I've got a few things going on. So startupdrinks.to.com for our startup investor drinks event, open bar, open pitch, sign up, come do 20-second pitch, meet the community. That's December 13th. So go to startupdrinks.to.com.
Last one of the
season. It'll be great. John will be there. I'll be there. And we'll get 80 plus other people. It'll be great. Mastering ads for business growth. On December 14th, that's online. Check that out at mentoringmagic.ca. And if you're looking to work with me, check out startupcoach.ca and book a call. The other thing I wanted to mention is at this last Startup Investor Drinks, we had these gentlemen out from Turalta Coffee. So I'm drinking that this morning. It's quite good. So check out turaltacoffee.com and the link will be in the show notes. And thanks for the free pound of coffee. And if you ever want me to shill your stuff, free stuff is the way to go. I'll try it and tell people what I think.
Absolutely.
So thanks everyone for joining us on the FutureTech Podcast. And we'll be back here next week. See you then.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Wow,